Welcome to the Multiply Your Success podcast, where each week we help growth-minded entrepreneurs and franchise leaders take the next step in their expansion journey. I'm your host, Tom Dufour, CEO of Big Sky Franchise Team. And as a leader in your company, you're probably familiar with this idea of hustle culture in business. What if that hustle culture was a myth, something that has yet to be proven? Well, our guest today is Trevor Blake, who shares with us how he's achieved success with balance and finding a different way of working outside of this hustle culture mindset. Now, Trevor G. Blake is a seasoned entrepreneur, best-selling author, and advisor known for building companies that thrive and exit successfully. He's had 3 exits of over $100 million each. He proves that success doesn't require hustle culture. His approach centers on alignment, vision, and energy mastery instead of burnout. Starting his first company with only a laptop, he went on to build multiple 9-figure businesses in the biotech and health sectors, all without employees' offices or unnecessary stress. As the author of the New York Times bestseller, 3 Simple Steps, Trevor is a leading voice in entrepreneurial mindset and energy management. His work empowers founders and professionals to achieve exceptional success while maintaining balance and clarity. You're going to love this interview, so let's go ahead and jump right into it.
Trevor George Blake, but people know me as Trevor G. Blake, so they can find me on the website trevorgblake.com. And I am a serial entrepreneur, so I don't really believe in fancy titles. I always think the smaller the company, the bigger the badge. So I've had 7 companies, and I've been the founder, CEO of all of those, if you want the particular titles. But I think of myself more as a fixer than an entrepreneur.
I think that's a great starting point. So you think of yourself as a fixer as opposed to an entrepreneur. So let's unpack that a little bit. What do you mean by that?
Well, I haven't met many successful entrepreneurs who actually set out to be that. I know it's a cool thing these days. People want to be an entrepreneur. But for me, I think the winning ideas always come from something we want to fix. So we walk around the world and we say, I wish that was different, or I wish there was such a solution for this or that. And oftentimes we look for it and we don't find it. And typically we'll say, you know what, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and I'm going to fix it myself. And that's been how all 7 companies have been my desire to fix something. And in every situation, and I'm sure your viewers and listeners can feel what I'm about to say, I felt completely unqualified, underfinanced. It's like, what am I doing? I must be crazy. But I set about doing it anyway. And I think the one thing we have as entrepreneurs is the ability to figure it out. And we do that. We end up doing that. And when we get it right, it's a wonderful thing. And we don't always get it right. But when we get it right, it feels fantastic.
I think that's a great description. And yet, for those that kind of make it through that initial push, you survive and all of a sudden you start thriving. And one of the things with your success in the different businesses that you've started and grown is talking about this idea of succeeding without burnout. You know, succeeding to me is a topic I find very valuable. I'd be curious. I'd love for you to share how you've been able to do that and some of the things you've found to work for you.
Yeah, I mean, great question. And so I come at it from perhaps a slightly different perspective than many people because I'm a scientist by education. I'm a physicist. And so I'm always fascinated with how and why things work. And what I've learned over the years is that as popular as it is, the hustle culture has no scientific support. But the sort of more, this sounds woo-woo, but I think you'll understand, the less we try, the more we let go. There's scientific evidence and neuroscience behind the power of that. And I learned that in the corporate world because I worked for people who wanted just to crush the day, to make 20 sales calls instead of 5 good ones, or to sit on the phone for 10 hours thinking that's going to be successful. And also held me as I went further up the totem pole and became, the big fancy title, the big badge, holding me in meeting rooms for hour after hour after hour, talking about nonsense that had nothing to do with expansion or product upgrade or customer satisfaction, and had everything to do with how do we make ourselves more satisfied and more entitled. So when I started as an entrepreneur, and I was 43 before I started my first company. So when I started as this quote unquote entrepreneur, I was determined not to fall into that trap. And the beautiful thing about, I'm sure many people associate with this, starting on your own, is that there's no one to blame. And there's also no one going to praise you. And the book kind of stops here at this point. And you think, okay, this money's coming out of my pocket now. why would I spend it wasting all of this time on a Monday update meeting and a Friday how do we do meeting and all this and performance and appraisal conversations? You just basically get on with it. A guy called George Rothman, who's no longer with us, unfortunately, he built Amgen from zero pretty much to 60 billion. And then he built the company that invented Cialis, and they sold it to Eli Lilly for 26 billion, I think. When I met him for the first time, he was in his 70s, and I was waxing lyrical about this business plan I had. And he said, Trevor, the secret is not to figure it out. The secret is to just start. And once you start, you'll realize that you're in a different business than the one you thought you were going to be in. And off you go in that direction. And then you realize there's something else there you'd never have seen if you hadn't been in the business, that you go in that direction. And he said, and that's how you spend your time. You don't spend your time in meeting rooms trying to figure it all out. And I took that to heart, and it's been a blessing to me. So when I started my first company, I went with what I call the hub model, which is basically no employees. I've in all 7 companies, I've never hired a single employee, which people find surprising. But the reason I've done that is that I decided I didn't want to spend all my hours training people or holding hands or, have negotiations over an extra 10% salary or something like that. I wanted to focus on getting the job done. And I find with vendors and contractors, they're already prepared. They already know what they're doing. And they, you give them a contract, they go get the job done. You decide whether you like playing in the sand together. So you may or may not renew the contract. It's a much less stressful way, I find, to build a business quickly. And that's the key thing for me, Tom, because we live in a world where get big fast is the way to succeed. We don't live in a world anymore, I don't think anyway. All the companies that are in the good to great and built to last, they're pretty much going out of business every week. And reason being, they're too slow to adapt. Their middle management is bloated, and it's hard to compete in a fast-paced world. So I think the hub model, if people are interested, I do have a couple of books. One that would make even a successful entrepreneur would, I think, like to free up some time in their life by having other people do the work for them. And so I have a book called Secrets to a Successful Startup. It's a New York Times bestseller. And even though it's about the startup world, it talks to tenured entrepreneurs think about using the hub model more than the hierarchical employee model. Because what you'll get out of it is you'll be able to spend time at home with your dogs or just time being human again and get the success with balance right. The hustle culture has no foundation at all.
That's very interesting. And I find it interesting that you knew about this and stayed focused on this idea of trying to avoid the hustle culture. And let's be frank, it's easy to buy into it and to get absorbed or consumed by that as you start a business and start growing a business and going through it. And as you were expanding into and growing through some of this, it made me think for this hub structure that you're talking about with the different businesses you've grown, that's not the typical transition or starting point that you would go with, is to maybe think of this hub structure. You might say, okay, well, I get going and then maybe I'll hire an operations person or a technician to help with this thing, or hire an admin to help support here. You've grown businesses, and we're not talking, small enterprises of a few $100,000. We're talking a few $100 million of companies and things that you've helped grow.
Yeah, actually, one of my companies right now, Neovir Oncology, is 1.2 billion. It's important to talk the numbers because I think when we start out, we can be quite fooled into thinking too small. In the get big fast culture, you really want people who immediately hit the ground running. I know it's a horrible cliche, but you really do need that. And what I felt that I needed as the sole proprietor or the entrepreneur, if you like, was the ability to focus on expansion and marketing and not on all the other minutiae. And I'm good at the other minutiae. I built a whole corporate career out of it. So it's an easy trap to fall into, and that causes burnout. And so I wanted to be able to focus constantly on what's next. It's worked really well. I mean, good, real life examples are important. So my first company, like I say, I started with, no idea where I was going or what I was doing, and no money to build anything, working out of home. It went from zero, and I sold it for 105.5 million after just 5.5 years. The number is really important because it's not an attaboy profile. It's not showing off. It's that to let people understand that these things are possible if you get it right early on. And if you didn't get it right at the start, you have time to get it right now so that you can align yourself to the way the world works now, which is basically you can go from 0 to 100 million in just a few years. Probably today, people would say, wow, 5 years? What took you so long? But when I was 43, it was unheard of. We still had dial-up internet. And so things were a little slower in those days. Things like Neovia Oncology, from it's a research and development company, from 0 to 1.2 billion has taken a bit longer because of the nature of the company we're in, but it's still been the same structure I've used. I've still only hired vendors and contractors. And what I like about that model, controversial though it seems to some people, is that it frees me up not to have the mentality of a supervisor. Like the CEO is almost like idolized by everybody else. Well, you're the CEO, you must know everything. In fact, what I found in the corporate world is the CEO knows less than anybody else and is somehow managing to get away with it. And I've played that role. It's to go away from supervision to go to peer-to-peer trust. So I trust implicitly the vendors and contractors that I rely on, and they love the fact that I'm not calling them up every 5 minutes saying, how's it going? I'm paying X amount of money to get the job done. If you can find a way to do it quicker, good for you. And that's what's worked. And so it allows me not just to build one company and then stop and exit and build another. It's allowed me to build several companies at the same time. So for instance, companies 7, 6, and 5 are all existing at the same time. And I spend less than, I'd say, an hour a day on each of those companies because I'm not taking a supervisory role. I'm taking peer-to-peer trust. My job is like a conductor of an orchestra, not the person who gets in and tries to train people how to play really well. My job is harmony. Get them all working together. And I like that role, and I think it fits. And again, necessity is the mother of invention. So starting in my first company and not having any money, I had to come up with a new way of doing it. And it worked so well. Everyone doubted me. Everyone said I was crazy. It took me ages to get anyone even to consider to invest in me. But when that all happened, and people telling me, it's impossible. Once they saw the net profit number, they were convinced. So a startup we were doing about 12 to 15 million a year in that company that I sold for 105.5. And it still exists. You can check it out online, Qual Medical. It's doing very well. The net profit, 76% on that was very attractive to suddenly the investors who said I was crazy and weren't interested. Once they saw that number, they said, okay, can we do it again and again and again? And so that's kind of what I've been doing.
Very interesting. So as I'm listening to you talk, makes me wonder, so as you start to scale and the volume starts to reach where it does in terms of revenue and customers served and all of that, do you eventually bring in a leadership team or a management team to kind of help you manage all these pieces and parts out there? Or do you still try to follow this hub model and essentially contracting that out?
So no, I don't. Never had an executive team. I've not brought in any executives. I don't even do board meetings. I just think that's such a waste of time and money. They're just ego caressing exercises. And so, and that wasn't a popular decision either when I first started out, but I held to it. And of course, if I hadn't been successful, they'd have got rid of me. But because it was successful, they were just happy to do it differently with me than they do with other people. And they would, I assume they thought, oh, it's just him. He's quirky. We'll do it his way. But it worked so successfully. One time I was brought into one of my investors' main meetings they hold annually down in Florida. There was about 100 other successful entrepreneurs in there. And they asked me to present this hub model because they wanted everybody else to have 76% net profits instead of relying on the 20 and 25%, which is still pretty good for most companies. And so I found that, and then people came up to me afterwards and says, well, how do I do that from where I am now? And I was able to show them how to just change out one thing at a time. Let that work and then go with the next one and then the next one, the next one. And I said, the big surprise for you, the side effect for you will be one day you'll be sat in your office and you'll be thinking, I must be doing something wrong because the phone's not going and I'm not getting any emails. And that's actually the sign that everything's going really well because you're no longer needed. I actually went on vacation for the first time a couple of years after starting Qual Medical. I went to London to visit family because I hadn't seen them for a while. I was gone 3 weeks. And it's at the time when cell phone internationally wasn't brilliant and I couldn't get any contact with anybody. And so after 3 weeks, I thought my company must be over. It's got to have collapsed in the time I've been away. And when I got back, the most common response I got from people was, oh, we didn't even know you'd left. We didn't know you'd gone. They're just carrying on and carrying on. So the companies end up running themselves to an extent. And one's job then is more sort of directional or harmony, as I like to say.
I understand you've got this 5-hour workday. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's not about, so I don't work 5 hours a day. I probably work about an hour, but that's because I've learned what I'm doing over the years. So, I found out in the corporate world how quickly burnout can happen and how such nonsense is spoken about. You've got to put in your 10 or your 12 hours. You can succeed that way, but probably you'll be on your third marriage. You'll be taking something to numb the pain of it. It's not a way to live. I like success with balance. I like to spend as much time in the hammock as I do sitting at a laptop having an amazing conversation like this. This is work to me, right? This is part of my workday, which is so much fun. So to help people get from one set of circumstances where they feel like there's not enough hours in the day to another set of circumstances, I teach a thing, and you can get it at trevorgblake.com. Everything's on that one website. I teach a thing which I call the practical magic of the 5-hour workday. And immediately someone sees that or hears that, they think woo-woo. And the second thing they think of is, oh, he means only being present 5 hours a day, but I don't. When it's explained, the science behind it, which is based on peak brain performance, so the neuroscience behind it, it's about how you schedule your day, because it's clearly shown by science we can't concentrate for more than 2 hours. We kid ourselves into thinking we're in the zone after that point, but we get diminishing returns and they drop off really quickly. And so the secret is to schedule the day into productive periods where being analytical is more beneficial, and then relaxation periods where being creative is more beneficial. And so I split my day up. I never work before 9. I never touch an electronic device before 9 o'clock in the morning. I get up at 6. I've got all these nice little morning routines that suit me. And then at 9 o'clock, I'll work from 9 to 11 on more the analytical side of things. And that's when I'm answering emails and, doing that kind of thing. And then from 11 till 2, I'll be completely off and you can't get me. I will not have my cell phone anywhere near me, so you can't disturb my quiet time. And in my quiet time, everyone who's listening to this knows what I'm talking about, because it's like being in the shower when you have that aha moment. And so for that period of time, I'll spend time with my wife. I'll spend time with I have an animal sanctuary too, so with my animals. I will spend time just walking by myself amongst the trees, trying not to have an idea. And then all of a sudden, this great idea hits me. And I'll always do the same thing. Why didn't I think of that earlier this morning? I could have saved myself an hour of work. And it happens every single day. And so we split it. And I come back at 2, probably after a nice long lunch with Jess, my wife, and I'll work from 2 to 4. I'm also a writer. I like to write. So the brain shows that it's at its most creative when it's tired, which is the opposite to what people think. And so between 5 and 6, when my brain is probably more tired than it has been any other time during the day, that's when I spend an hour just writing something. I write screenplays. I write 3 Simple Steps, which I think you know about, and Secrets to a Successful Startup. They came out of having the winning idea and then writing between 5 and 6 every day. And I'm done at that point. I have separate devices for home and work. That's really important if you want to work that day successfully. And so that means that I can't be disturbed at night by work, and during the day I can't be disturbed by family, because I've got my work devices, and then at nighttime I've got my domestic devices. And that keeps my life nice and split, which means I'm being fair to everybody, giving my same amount of time and dedication and energy to everybody. And that leads to a very happy life. I mean, I think hopefully I come over as a pretty happy guy. I'm having a pretty good time here. And I'm gray-haired. It's not like I'm young talking about this, So it's a beautiful way to live, but it takes a little practice, and you can't go from one set of circumstances to the other overnight. You have to build it in slowly. So if you go to trevorgblake.com, there's a free PDF, which is called The Practical Magic of the 5-Hour Workday. And it sort of teaches how to start to build success with balance into what for most people is a crazy life of hustle. And it changes the whole life. It changes your relationships. It changes your health. It's just a wonderful way to work.
What's the website again for them to go to?
TrevorGblake.com. Everything that we're talking about here is on that site. I started all this after I sold Qual Medical, because most people who are teaching, most life coaches, have never really had any success before they entitled themselves that way. Most of the self-help and personal development books out there were not written by people who'd used a formula to get success. So I waited until I could prove it. The proof of concept, I think, is essential for any business these days. So I waited till I proved the model, the 5-hour workday, and basically the mentality to run both, and then wrote 3 Simple Steps. So you can get a copy of 3 Simple Steps on trevorgblake.com. I think you can read the first 3 chapters for free. It's a New York Times bestseller 3 times. It's done really well without any promotion. So yeah, the information's all there for people if they're a little more interested and want to go down the rabbit hole. Then I've got lots of freebies for everybody.
And Trevor, this is a great time in the show, and we make a transition and we ask every guest the same 4 questions before they go. And the first question is, have you had a miss or 2 on your journey and something you learned from it?
Yeah, well, too many. We don't have enough time for all of them. So the big one for me was I started a company with 2 partners, and that was a big mistake. And for me, it was a big mistake because of the personality clash, because we all got into the venture together for completely different reasons, and we never took the time to ask each other why we're doing it. We just got in and did it. And then I found out that one was to get rich quick. That didn't happen, so we ran off with quite a bit of our money. And then the other person was interested only in growing big enough in order to put his kids through college. And I had other dreams, right? That doesn't mean mine were better or right, or there's no judgment here, just that we were never aligned dream-wise. And so that was my first big mistake. I never did it again because it's painful and stressful when it happens like that. And it's always sad to say bye to people you actually got together with in the first place. The second thing is, when I first started out, I didn't know anything about the finance world or the investor world. And I knew I needed to raise exactly 2.1 million. And it took me 18 months to raise 2.1 million. And then halfway through that company, this was Qual Medical, so about 3 years in, I saw an opportunity. This was a great opportunity, but I needed 28 million. And I raised 28 million in less than 6 weeks. Big lesson. A big mistake, first off, because I ended up giving away 30% of the country of the company for 2 million. With the second deal, the 28 million, I only gave away 10% because the investors were working off a perception of 25% of 2 million is not even worth the paperwork, whereas 25% return on 28 million is worth getting involved. So I learned a very good lesson early on that you should always bring investors in because they bring so much more than the money, connections, network, skills. There are a lot of freebies that come with them, especially on the attorney side and the IP side. So I always try to bring investors in at some point, but I won't bring them in at a small number anymore. I'll go as high as I can possibly go without laughing at myself in a mirror. I find it's much easier to raise money that way. But that was a miss. I didn't, out of ignorance on my part, but I learned the lesson.
Great example. Thank you for sharing. And on the flip side of that, a make or a highlight or 2.
Well, I'm proud of all 7 companies, and they've all had an impact in the world in some way, which wasn't what I set out to do. I'm not trying to make myself sound like a hero or anything. I set out to be successful, financially successful, egotistically successful. I wanted all my family and friends to say, "Oh, didn't you do well?" So I'm the same as everybody else. I'm not afraid of the recognition or the praise. I don't think. But the highlight of it all is that when we go out and fix something, we automatically start to make an impact because everybody else is using the solution that we found a way to figure it out. So I'm most proud of that, and I think my current company, NeoV Oncology, I'm really proud. We set out to do something that the whole world said was impossible, and I was delusional, and I couldn't get any investment into this company because of that. And what we set out to do was to create a cancer treatment that had no side effects. And this is a personal thing to me. I'm a cancer survivor, but the side effects were horrible. My mother was she didn't survive cancer. She had cancer, died, but the side effects were horrible. So I've always been fascinated in finding a way to provide powerful treatments to cancer cells that don't cause the side effects. And we figured it out. We started this in 2005. We'd figured it out by 2012, and we finished our first clinical trials, phase 1A they're called, just over a year ago. And now we're negotiating with a bunch of companies that want to take it, and it's at the right stage where it needs to graduate from my little kindergarten idea mentality to something massive. And that's very exciting. So I'm really proud of that because at the end of it, yes, it's a successful business idea because it's unique in the market, but also it's going to have a legacy effect. And the more I look in the mirror and see the gray hairs, the more important the legacy becomes to me. So I'm really happy about that.
Well, thank you for sharing. And the name of the show is Multiply Your Success. And so always ask, have you used a multiplier to grow yourself personally or professionally or some of the organizations you've run?
So it goes back to what we talked about earlier on with the hub model. I think that is a big opportunity for people that they may miss, even if all it does is reduce costs, right? You want to get that delta, between expenses and revenue as wide as possible, because then the stress goes away. And then we can have fun playing with things, saying, oh, I've got this I can invest in, this I can invest. So you want to make that as wide as possible. So for me, that was the big multiplier, not because I figured it out, but because it worked. It worked the first time. And so I've just used it every time. So that is my multiplier. And I have so much fun doing it that I will never stop. I'll be 6 feet under before I'm forced to stop doing this. And that's fun, right? So to wake up every morning and get excited about what's next is, I think, the multiplier might work physically and analytically and mechanically on the company, but it works just as much mentally for me, because I'm excited about what's happening, what's going to be next. And to get to my age, I love being this age, but to get to my age and then still feel like a kid who's got so much more to contribute, that means that's a really good, that hub model is a great multiplier.
Trevor, the final question we ask every guest is, what does success mean to you?
For me, it means waking up every morning excited. That's, for me, number one in my life. And that might not be important to most people, but that fits my character. I don't want to wake up open my eyes and go, oh God, it's Monday. I want to wake up going, it's Monday. I can't wait. What's this week going to bring? And so that's that I think is the side effect or payoff of being an entrepreneur and it going well. Because you just want to go more and more and do better and better. And so for me, that's it. Yeah. The sign of happiness for me in business, because we're talking about business, is to wake up really excited. I have to say I've been very lucky in relationships too. So I wake up excited about my relationships. I've had two. I've never dated. My first wife, we were married 40 years minus 1 month before she died in 2020. And then I met this amazing ex-Disney executive who's now independent, Jess. And so we're 4 years old. And so we're very excited about building companies together.
As we bring this to a close, Trevor, is there anything you were hoping to share or get across that you haven't had a chance to yet?
No, sometimes when it's, talk is cheap, I guess. And so sometimes I even though I say, don't try to figure it all out, just jump in and start, most people still try to figure it out. And sometimes I don't talk enough about that. I do get people asking me sometimes, can you help me write my business plan? And I'm saying, this is controversial. I'm saying, no, this is a different world now. We don't start with a business plan. We start by going out. We get away from our computer and we talk to real customers and real stakeholders, and we let them tell us how to build our business. And then we go and find the vendors who can do it for us and for them. And you can't lose them because you're giving them exactly what they asked for, exactly what they need. I meet a lot of entrepreneurs who come out of like MBA school and they think that the secret is to figure it all out on a piece of paper for 2 years before they even begin to start. And then they erroneously think that that business plan is going to get them an investment. All the evidence I've seen is that the investment comes when the entrepreneur says, yes, I spoke to these people. Yes, I spoke to those people. Yes, I learned this from what they told me. I've had a prototype. I've redone the prototype. I've got a proof of concept. I went back to those people and said, here it is for free. Try it. Let me know how it goes and what the benefits are. And I use that as data. And I can now come to you and say, let's go fast. Let's scale this as fast as possible because I've proved the concept. So I don't talk enough about that because in these wonderful podcasts, time goes so quickly. But I think that's a podcast in and of itself, the value of a proof of concept over a business plan. I'd love to talk about that topic one day.
That's a great idea. And, it's something we definitely see for sure with so many of the clients I've worked with over the years that had an idea, as you said, to fix something, to solve some problem they identified and just said, I'm going to do it. And they started doing it and figured out a way to monetize it. And all of a sudden it started growing and then franchised. And all of a sudden it's a national brand. So I see exactly what you're saying there.
Yeah, the franchise thing, because you and I had a 2-minute conversation before we started about franchise. For me, that is definitely a stage. And, when I first started my first company, I wasn't thinking in those terms. I wasn't thinking franchise. So I wasn't thinking like Big Sky or anything like that, because I don't know if you existed when I started my first company, but I was thinking more in terms of, okay, you build it to a certain size, then you sell, you exit, you get acquired. And that's fine. It was a really good business model for me. But with TrevorGBlake.com, and that's definitely one that I'm thinking about. This is something that would be an amazing franchise. So that, you put that idea in my mind right at the beginning. It is about getting big fast, whatever mechanism we can use to do that.
Trevor, thank you so much for a fantastic interview. And let's go ahead and jump into today's 3 key takeaways. So takeaway number 1 is when Trevor shared he's a physicist by training and likes to fix and solve problems. And he said he's done research and looked up this research on hustle culture, and he found no scientific support for that. I found that interesting. Takeaway number 2 is that he runs his businesses on this hub model, or this hub structure, where he keeps his employees as low as possible and hires contractors and consultants to work with him on contracts. And he's found a great deal of success in building companies, one of which is a $1.2 billion a year business. And he sold one of his companies for over $105 million running on this type of operation. Takeaway number 3 is he described his 5-hour workday that he builds on, and he talked about working when there is peak brain performance based on your schedule of the day. And so he has found scheduling his day in a very specific way where he's able to do analytical time in the morning and creative time later on in the day. And now it's time for today's win-win. So today's win-win comes from when Trevor was talking about thinking of himself as a fixer and as opposed to an entrepreneur or a founder or something else. And he said all 7 of his companies were designed to solve a problem. And he started them underfinanced, unqualified, but he decided to do it anyway. And he did that. And what he learned, as he shared later on in the episode, that you're able to talk to real stakeholders, real customers, and listen to what they say when you get started. So talking about things, researching, yes, that can be beneficial, but ultimately you got to get started and get some customers and hear what they say and take that feedback and learn from it. And so that's the episode today, folks. Please make sure you subscribe to the podcast and give us a review. And remember, if you or anyone you know might be ready to franchise their business or take their company to the next level, please connect with us at bigskyfranchiseteam.com, where you can schedule your free, no obligation consultation. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to having you back next week.